Have you ever worked with someone who wasn't the smartest in the room but somehow always got the promotion, sealed the deal, or left meetings looking like a hero? You know the type. They read the room like a detective, diffuse conflict like a diplomat, and somehow always get what they want without seeming manipulative. What if I told you their secret weapon wasn't charm, luck, or some Machiavellian strategy, but something measurable, trainable, and shockingly profitable? Emotional intelligence, EQ, isn't just about being emotionally in tune. It's a form of soft skill that's become hard currency. In today's economy, people with high EQ consistently out-earn, out-lead, and outlast their competitors. And the best part, it's not reserved for the naturally gifted. You can build it. So let's break it down. Why EQ matters more than ever, what it really means, how it shows up in money moves, and how you can sharpen it like a tool belt full of Jedi mind tricks. Let's get your dose of bean-scent knowledge. Let's start with the elephant in the boardroom. Emotional intelligence makes money, like real money. The most extensive research on this comes from TalentSmart, which analyzed EQ scores alongside performance data from over 33 industries. The result? People with high emotional intelligence earn an average of $29,000 more per year than those with low EQ. That's not a rounding error, that's a second income stream. And the correlation doesn't taper off. The higher up you go in leadership or client-facing roles, the more your EQ pays off. But why? Why would understanding emotions have anything to do with dollar signs? It helps to think of the modern workplace as less of a factory line and more like a multiplayer strategy game. Success isn't just about how fast you can work, it's about how well you can coordinate with others, interpret vague objectives, and influence decisions. And EQ is basically your cheat code for human systems. Unlike IQ, which governs how well you solve a problem, EQ governs whether people want to solve the problem with you. And in a world of group projects that never end, startups, cross-functional teams, remote collaboration, EQ is now the deciding factor between good worker and person we trust with leadership. Let's take a concrete example. In sales, the most successful reps aren't the ones who memorize the most product specs. They're the ones who feel when a buyer is hesitant. They adjust tone, pace, even silence. Harvard Business Review found that salespeople with high EQ consistently outperform their peers by 50% or more in closing rates. Same thing in negotiation. A high EQ person knows when to push, when to pause, and when to let the other side talk themselves into a corner. A low EQ person just keeps throwing out bullet points until they burn the deal. Even in engineering, yes, engineering, Google's internal study, Project Oxygen, found that the best team leaders weren't necessarily the best coders. They were the ones with empathy, good communication, and the ability to resolve conflict without turning every stand-up meeting into a duel at dawn. You might be wondering, why don't schools teach this? That's a fair question, and the answer is changing. Some education systems now include SEL or social emotional learning as a core component, but for adults, the onus falls on you. Now here's a twist. Emotional intelligence isn't just one thing, it's a suite of skills, some natural, some trainable, that together give someone that smooth, confident, unshakable presence we all want to be around, or be hired by. Which means good news, it's not genetic destiny. But we'll get to that later. First, let's break EQ down into its parts and how most people are walking around using only half of it. Most people think emotional intelligence just means being good with people. But that's like saying a smartphone is just a camera. It's technically true, but you're ignoring 90% of what makes it powerful. EQ isn't one soft, squishy muscle. It's a 5-part command center that runs everything from impulse control to political strategy. Psychologist Daniel Goleman, who basically popularized the entire concept of emotional intelligence in the 1990s, broke it down into 5 components: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skill. Let's walk through them because odds are you're probably overdeveloped in one and underestimating the others. Self-awareness is your ability to notice your own emotions as they happen. That sounds simple until you remember how often we act on autopilot. Ever snapped at someone because you were actually just hungry? That's very low self-awareness. High self-awareness is like running a constant diagnostic on your brain's dashboard. Like, I'm not mad at John, I'm anxious about the deadline. This one's crucial because if you can't name your emotion, you can't change your reaction. You're not in charge, you're just a very articulate puppet. Self-regulation is next. It's not about bottling things up, it's about directing emotions without letting them hijack your logic. High EQ people don't avoid anger, they steer it. They don't explode, they recalibrate. Like knowing you're frustrated in a meeting but choosing to follow up with a calm email rather than getting Slack on fire. In corporate terms, self-regulation is why someone doesn't get fired after getting passed over for a raise. It's grace under pressure. It's Jedi-level composure. It's also the difference between long-term career growth and being labeled as difficult. Motivation in this context doesn't mean rah-rah cheerleader energy. It's intrinsic motivation, the kind that fuels you internally without external rewards. High EQ people pursue goals because they're meaningful, not just for status. They stay curious, resilient, and focused even when things get tough. They're the ones who fail a presentation and think, okay, what can I improve next time? Not, I suck and I'm quitting. This is often what separates leaders from followers, the ability to keep driving the mission even when the applause dies down. Then we get to empathy, arguably the star of the EQ show, but it's also the most misunderstood. Empathy is not feeling everyone's pain all the time. That's called burnout. True empathy is the ability to sense what others are feeling and adjust accordingly. It's pattern recognition for emotions. High EQ people detect the subtext in a conversation and not just the words. They can tell when a team is demoralized even when no one's complaining, and they know when someone's silence means confusion instead of agreement. Empathy is what allows leaders to avoid tone-deaf decisions, salespeople to anticipate client objections, and co-workers to avoid accidentally becoming the office villain. And finally, social skill, the ability to manage relationships and move people in desired directions. It's not being extroverted, although extroverts can benefit. It's about knowing how to listen actively, navigate conflict, build rapport, and when needed, lead the vibe. Fun fact, social skill is also a predictor of influence. People with high EQ aren't the loudest, they're the ones whose opinions stick after the meeting ends. They're trusted, and in workplaces where trust equals opportunity, that's your leverage. Now let's quickly clear up two myths. Myth number 1, EQ means being nice. Nope, high EQ people aren't doormats. In fact, the best ones are excellent at saying no with empathy. Emotional intelligence isn't about people pleasing, it's about reading people effectively and making wise interpersonal choices, even if that means delivering hard truths. Myth number 2, you either have EQ or you don't. Also false. Unlike IQ, which stabilizes early in life, EQ is plastic. The brain regions responsible for empathy, regulation, and decision making can grow and adapt with effort, especially if you treat emotions like skills, not instincts. Neuroscience backs this up. Practices like mindfulness, journaling, and structured feedback have been shown to increase EQ-related brain activity. It's not magic, it's reps. Here's one wild tidbit. MRI studies show that emotionally intelligent leaders have more active mirror neurons when observing others. That means they're literally wired to internalize what others are feeling. It's a neuro-based social radar. So to recap, EQ isn't fluff. It's a technical framework for surviving and thriving in human systems. And if you're only focusing on empathy or charisma, you're missing out on the real toolkit. Next, let's dive into how those tools show up in high-stakes environments and how the people using them are getting promoted while the rest of us are still proofreading our resumes. Let's move from theory to paycheck, because emotional intelligence isn't just some TED Talk buzzword. It shows up in job interviews, salary negotiations, team dynamics, and performance reviews like an invisible VIP badge. The people using it, they're not always the loudest in the room, but they tend to leave the room richer. Let's start with Google, a company that practically prints money and data. In 2008, they launched a massive internal study called Project Oxygen. Its goal? Find out what makes the best managers tick. Most assumed the answer would be technical brilliance, but the data told a very different story. The top performing managers weren't coding gods or analytics ninjas. They were better at coaching, communicating, listening, and understanding their team's needs. In short, there were high EQ leaders. The lesson? Even at a tech company obsessed with IQ, it was EQ that kept teams running like a Tesla on cruise mode. It doesn't stop at Google. At PepsiCo, executives identified as emotionally intelligent outperformed their peers so significantly that the company generated $3.75 million more per year per high EQ leader. It's the closest thing corporate HR has to a superpower serum. And if you zoom into the psychology behind performance, things get even juicier. Take the marshmallow test, one of the most famous psychological experiments of all time. Kids were told you can have one marshmallow now or wait 15 minutes and get two. Decades later, follow-ups found that kids who waited didn't just have better self-control, they had higher SAT scores, healthier relationships, and more stable finances. But here's the twist. The adult version of the marshmallow test plays out every day. Choosing not to rage reply to a dumb email, that's emotional self-regulation. Staying curious in a boring meeting instead of zoning out, that's motivation. Letting someone else speak even when you know you're right, that's empathy and social skill. Let's get more cutthroat. Negotiations. The landmark book Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher and William Ury emphasized that successful negotiators aren't just persuasive, they're empathetic. High EQ negotiators pick up on tone, hesitation, and body language. They recognize when someone's bluffing or when a silence means, I need a better deal. Chris Voss, former FBI hostage negotiator, built an entire methodology around tactical empathy. When lives were on the line, he didn't yell, he listened. He mirrored, he labeled emotions. It sounds like you're frustrated became more powerful than here's my offer. Imagine what that could do in your next raise discussion. And emotional intelligence is sneakily at work in hiring too. Ever notice how job interviews don't just assess what you know, but how you react under pressure? That's not a coincidence. Studies from the University of South Carolina show that EQ indicators like adaptability, response tone, and eye contact are stronger predictors of hireability than technical answers. Recruiters want people who won't melt in conflict, who uplift teams instead of draining them, and who can take feedback without turning into a defensive porcupine. Here's an even wilder stat. A 2020 LinkedIn study of hiring trends showed that 92% of talent professionals ranked soft skills as equally or more important than hard skills, and emotional intelligence topped the list. Let's look at career mobility. High EQ individuals are more likely to be promoted, and not because they schmooze their bosses over lunch. It's because they know when to speak up in meetings, how to take criticism with curiosity, and how to diffuse tension in high-stakes projects. They build trust capital. Their co-workers rely on them in a crisis, and leaders notice that. When a manager sees you consistently reduce friction, ease tensions, and help the team gel, they don't need a reason to promote you. You are the reason. Even in pay negotiations, EQ pays off. According to a Yale study, candidates with high emotional intelligence were 3 times more likely to walk away with higher salaries because they read the room better, responded more calmly to resistance, and framed their requests in ways that made mutual sense. And this isn't just for executives. Entry-level workers with strong emotional intelligence outperform peers in roles involving customer service, team projects, and even warehouse operations. The World Economic Forum lists EQ as one of the top 10 skills for the future of work, alongside tech literacy, complex problem solving, and creativity. That's the silent revolution. As machines handle more hard skills, it's human skills, empathy, communication, trust that become the rare currency. Let's cap it off with a comparison. Imagine 2 professionals. One is brilliant but short-tempered, dismissive in meetings, and panics under pressure. The other is technically average but calm in chaos, great with people, and always builds bridges. Guess who ends up leading the team, influencing decisions, and earning more? Spoiler, it's the one who turns emotion into strategy, and that's the real power of emotional intelligence in action. Now, let's move from analysis to application. Because EQ isn't just something you admire, it's something you build. No personality transplant required. Here's the good news. You don't need to be a social butterfly or some Zen monk to build emotional intelligence. You don't even need to like group projects. High EQ people aren't always the smoothest talkers or the warmest huggers. They're just more attuned. They learn to decode their own wiring and read others with clarity. And most importantly, they practice. So let's break down how to build EQ practically, sustainably, and without becoming someone you're not. Step 1. Train your inner narrator. The foundation of EQ is the ability to notice your emotions in real time. Most of us walk through life reacting, not realizing. You snap at a coworker because they were being difficult, not because you skipped breakfast, argued with your partner, and walked into work carrying a mood like a fog machine. Start narrating yourself, like a nature documentary, but with less David Attenborough and more, I'm irritated and it's 10 a.m. What's that about? This is emotional pattern recognition. One powerful method is mood journaling. Spend 5 minutes each day tracking what you felt, when, and why. Over time, you'll spot patterns like, I'm always anxious after meetings with Karen, or every Tuesday I get edgy. Alright, budget check-ins. Step 2. Rewire the reaction loop. Now that you see your emotions, you need to redirect them. And no, this doesn't mean bottling them up like a soda can ready to explode. Think of emotions as weather systems. Your job isn't to stop the storm, but to steer the boat. When you feel anger, stress, or panic rise, insert a micro pause. This is a beat, literally 3 seconds, between stimulus and response. One technique is box breathing. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold again. It slows your nervous system and stops the hijack. Also, practice replacement thoughts. Instead of, he disrespected me, try, that felt dismissive. How do I want to respond intentionally? You're not ignoring the emotion, you're rechanneling it into strategy. Step 3. Build empathy without emotional drain. You don't need to cry in every Pixar movie to be empathetic. Empathy is about seeing from another perspective, not absorbing everyone's feelings like a sponge. Try this 3-step exercise during conversations. Observe, what's their body language or tone saying? Label, they seem frustrated, confused, defensive. Check, hey, you seem a bit off. Would you like to talk through it? This takes practice, especially if your default mode is to fix it or tune it out. But even small empathetic signals like saying, that sounds rough, instead of giving advice, build trust like crazy. Trust is the invisible handshake of every successful relationship, personal or professional. Step 4. Sharpen your social skill. This isn't about becoming the life of the party. It's about managing human dynamics with nuance. Practice active listening. Paraphrase what someone says. Ask clarifying questions, not with your face and not just your head. Use calibrated questions. Instead of, why didn't you finish the report? Try, what got in the way this week? Give feedback in the bless press format. Open with something genuine you value, then shift gently to the constructive piece. Example, I really appreciate how thorough your research was. One thing I think could make your next draft stronger is tightening the conclusion. It'll land even better. Step 5. Strengthen motivation the EQ way. You don't need to become a motivational poster. You need to find the why behind what you do and return to it when stress or failure hits. Try this method. Write down your top 3 career goals. Next to each, write why it matters to you, not just to your boss. Then list what emotionally gets in your way. I procrastinate because I fear judgment. I avoid feedback because I link it to self-worth. Now you're coaching yourself. Motivation isn't rah-rah. It's emotional alignment. And here's the kicker. You don't have to do this all perfectly. EQ is messy. You'll still blurt things out, get defensive, and misread people. But high EQ folks aren't perfect. They're reflective. They get better because they notice when they mess up. In fact, one of the most emotionally intelligent things you can say is, wait, let me try that again. So, no, you don't have to change your personality. You don't need to love small talk or cry during meetings or meditate on a rock at sunrise. You just need to care enough to observe, adjust, and try again. That's EQ. It's not an app, it's not a badge, it's a set of behaviors layered with intention and powered by practice. And in a world where the ability to connect and adapt is becoming more valuable than raw data or brute effort, emotional intelligence isn't just nice to have. It's a survival trait, a leadership trait, a wealth trait. Now, let's wrap up by stepping back and asking the big question. What kind of person do you want to become? Not just to succeed, but to thrive. If you've made it this far, you've already done something most people won't. You've started paying attention to the invisible forces that shape human success. Emotional intelligence isn't just about workplace politics or making people like you. It's about becoming the kind of person who leaves a room better than they found it because they understood it. It's a difference between reacting and responding, between bulldozing and building, between impressing people and influencing them. And here's the part that matters most. You don't build EQ for applause. You build it so you don't lose yourself in pressure. You build it so you can lead without manipulation, connect without pretending, and grow without burning out. Because the world doesn't need more charisma, it needs more clarity. More people who can hold complexity with calm. People who can disagree without disrespecting. People who can succeed without stepping on others to get there. And that person, that can absolutely be you. Whether you're a data nerd, an artist, a manager, or just someone trying to stop doom scrolling long enough to send one brave email, emotional intelligence will serve you. So take what you've learned here, reflect, practice, rewind and rephrase when needed, and come back next time when we'll crack open another strange, brilliant pocket of the human experience because there's always more beans and knowledge where this came from.